folks, welcome back to Untitled Chapter. This is Chris once again. Hello, folks, and welcome back to Fireside with the Colonels. This is our second iteration. We got a new banner up. And first order of business after I welcome my friend there in South Africa is that I'm going to have to get an opening credits made just for that, kind of like Bulk and the guy sitting around a fire, that sort of thing, maybe some images from our experience. But I'll talk to somebody about making that. We don't want specific our program. But today I'll be welcoming my co-host for this program, Fireside with the Colonels, where we talk about politics, current events, and maybe a few war stories. Colonel Wynand, Toit. How are you today?
Good evening. No, it's fine. We have been extremely busy. I heard you talking earlier about your visit to DC, and but I can tell you there was also no weekend for us or for me. It's meeting upon meeting and planning session upon planning session. And last night we started working to get our radio station in the air very soon. So yes, we have been busy.
So
quite busy.
Radio station, is this an AM, FM, Afrikaans language medium, or what's the deal?
Chris, we are going to mainly broadcast on AM.
Okay.
And we got a 10 kilowatt transmitter, which will give us round about the possibility of even reaching South America.
Wow.
And very high up above the Congo. And the whole thing is that we have created the ability to be able to talk to the people, even in the case of anarchy. And once everything crashed down in South Africa, which is now inevitable that it's going to happen. You've seen the Lindiwe, Sisulu, Ramaphosa power struggle that's going on. And the decay is just tremendous at this stage. So I can't see them lifting it out. And if Russia invades Ukraine, then we are all a bit buggered. But this radio station will then give us the opportunity to reach all people and to give them guidance and advice on how to, where to go. But until we received our formal license to broadcast, we will be available on internet as from the end of February.
Okay.
So we will stream on the internet, and it's called Radio Groot Rivier, reference to the Orange River, of course, which has been called since the Boer War times, being called the Groot Rivier. But we are extremely excited. Things are happening and great things. And I just love it when things start falling into place and things start working out. That's great. So yeah, we're quite excited.
Well, let me ask a couple of questions about that. First off, so is this an early warning network radio station, or will it have programming? Will it be people on the news and talk shows and maybe music, or is it just to let people know when events are happening?
No, it will be a normal radio station. We will broadcast music and experiences and news and all those things. So it will broadcast normally. We do plan also to do it on FM, but we know that FM is not going to reach further than, say, maximum 100, 150 kilometers around the town. So we will do it, and we will do advertisements, we will cover school events, we will cover whatever is happening here near the Groot Rivier. So we got a lot of plans. We're going into a training session for 2 weeks, starting the 14th of February. And because I must train everybody now, not me, because I almost know nothing about radio. Although I have been on radio a couple of times, but I don't understand everything. So we will have the professionals here to help explain us, and I will appoint a radio manager, station manager, who knows how it is working. So we will try to reach the community, and be just a normal radio station. But in the event of catastrophe, we will be there to continue broadcasting with backup power systems and everything already in place.
Excellent. Well, you may not have experience in radio, but I suspect that if called upon, in a distant war somewhere in the past, you could probably take out a radio tower and know how to destroy it. I'm just saying. In case that skill.
Yeah, well.
We'll leave that there. But no, so well, I don't know if you go ahead.
No, Chris, at this stage, I had to demolish a certain part of a church in South Africa and rebuild a new part, because I was also in the construction business at a stage. And then the church elders got together and they said, well, the tower of the church must go. But we cannot allow Wynand to do it. We will have to get professionals, because we will pick up this tower all over town if we allow him to do it.
Everywhere.
Exactly.
They wanted an implosion, not an explosion. They want implosion. That's what they want.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I mean, like you, I can help with the explosion. I'm not so good at implosions, but anyway. But seriously, so listen. I look. If I don't know if the obviously it's going to be an Afrikaans medium, but if the intent's for all the program be Afrikaans, but if you're open to English programs, I'd be willing. I'd be interested in offering Insight into America program if that's of interest. On your radio program, I could do it from here. If you don't have to commit to it, I'm just making the offer.
Yeah, Chris, definitely. Thank you very much. We will make use of that, because, we are not language bound.
Okay.
Yes, it's a cultural radio station, but we also got members that is English speaking. We got members listening in from Australia and everywhere. So we would very much like to have English programs as well. And it is important because in the end, once the problem starts, we want to reach the outside world. Mm-hmm. So we will. And thanks for that offer. We will definitely pull you into the situation or into the station.
It would be my pleasure. Absolutely. So, we started this with so many things going on. I mean, good Lord. Let's get to South Africa shortly, but I think let's start with this, the Ukraine. All right, let me run through a few points, and then we can pick them apart. First off, when Trump was president, the media, the fake stream media, freaked out and made this ludicrous claim that Trump was going to lead us into nuclear conflagration with North Korea. First off, North Korea has no missiles that can reach America yet. They have some wayward missiles that reach the Aleutians, but couldn't hit their target off by hundreds of miles. So that was not going to happen. Second, Trump is, look, I'm not being a fanboy for Trump, but Trump knew what he was doing. He was stroking the ego of a guy who felt inferior and wanted attention. And all that Trump was trying to do is stop the launches of intercontinental ballistic missiles over the Sea of Japan and over Japanese airspace, because that's an act of war. They have been doing it. So Trump met with the guy and he's like, oh, and guess what? North Korea never did it again until Biden came back, and now they're launching missiles again over the Sea of Japan. So let's look at the Ukraine. So during Obama's administration, they annexed the Ukraine. And they invade Eastern Third with the Russian army pretending to be dissidents, and then they occupy the Eastern Third of the Ukraine. That's under Obama and Biden. And now Biden's back, and he's just rattling the sabers, trying to cause trouble. He's selling weapons to the Ukraine beyond what we've done in the past. That's one thing. We've been selling weapons under Trump. We sold them the anti-tank weapons there, which has been going on for the Javelin. But he got the Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to sell weapons that are NATO weapons specifically from the U.S. to Ukraine. That's very provocative. Now we have to evacuate our diplomats, and they're evacuating diplomats to and now he's talking about deploying troops to Eastern Europe as a counterweight to. This is insane. This demented lunatic is taking us to war.
Because when the guys, we were studying the Second World War and why Hitler invaded, and it's very much a similar situation that we are getting now. Hitler had no choice but to invade, and the world said he started the war by invading Poland. Here we are sitting with exactly the same situation. Russia is protecting its integrity, its borders. When the Soviet Union collapses, there were several secretaries of state that made statements, declarations, and it was even signed into an agreement that NATO will not expand their borders eastwards. So when the Soviet Union collapses, there was one NATO nation bordering the Soviet Union. There's now 5. Now, Ukraine is not a member, and Russia said, well, if Ukraine becomes a member, there's problems. But now, and the reason why is NATO moved all their offensive weaponry to the borders of Russia under the disguise of they are expanding democracy and I don't know what else, which they've used as excuses. But now they are sending, as you have said, Latvia, all those places are now sending weapons to Ukraine. That's exactly what Russia don't want. That's exactly why I don't want Ukraine to be a NATO nation, so that they don't deploy their weapons on its borders. And now they are doing it anyway. So they are leaving Putin no choice but to invade Ukraine. And it's going to happen sooner or later. And we must be very conscious about the fact that this invasion can very much engulf the whole of Europe.
Yep.
And it can become the Third World War. I mean, everything. It has never been so opportune. I made a comment to you, I think, 2 talks in the past previously. I said to you that look at the United States from Putin's view. With Biden in power, it is the opportune moment to move because Biden will lack the confidence or the ability to make the decision to send troops to Ukraine. So they will use this situation. If I was the leader of Russia, a military leader, I would have done exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about this is that you're absolutely right as so far as the all of that, but specifically about the expansion of the borders. Whether NATO agreed to do it or not, it's provocative. Even if they had never said they're not going to expand eastward. I mean, now with the exception of Finland in the north, which is a neutral nation, not part of NATO, every square millimeter of Russian territory going down will have, well, except for Belarus, will have a NATO front. So I mean, almost the entire western border of Russia will be bordered by NATO countries, and you know the natural border. If you're gonna look at Russia's natural border, it really probably isn't the eastern border of the Ukraine on a map. It's the Dnieper River, which splits Ukraine in half. That's a natural boundary. I mean, Russia. I could see why Russia easily would want to have that as its natural western boundary as part of Russian territory. Of course, you know Ukraine was originally that's the original Russia. The Kievan Rus was founded by Vikings. That's where Russia started out as. But no, it's very disturbing, and the press is very quiet on this compared to how they were screaming like banshees when Trump was president about he's going to lead us into war. The irony is Trump took us out of wars. You know, I'm not trying to be a fanboy for Trump, but the reality is that he took us out of conflicts, quite the contrary to his predecessors, Clinton, Bush, and Obama, who took us into one conflict after another. Trump took us out of them. And it didn't prevent him from doing humanitarian assistance. We still did that. We just didn't wind up in a nation-building bunch of nonsense like we do in a lot of countries. It's crazy.
Yeah, the mainstream media is a very concerned, and that Chris, are you there?
I'm here. The connection's bad on your side.
Okay. But good news is I'm getting fiber tomorrow.
Yes.
So then I can do 100 bips. So I'm looking forward to that. Then I'm not dependent on this very slow and low bips scenario that I'm on in now. But you know, very much the same as they have blamed Hitler for invading Poland, they will blame Russia for invading Ukraine. But never in the history will they say what led up to it.
Yep.
And the press is absolutely quiet. It's more realistic today to watch Russia today and to watch Al Jazeera if you want up-to-date news. Not the BBC, not CNN is reporting factual about it. And the problem is in South Africa, we can't watch Fox News, except if you put it on an app or something. And CNN is the only American channel that we can watch. So everybody this side is so pro-Biden, you can't even believe it. Yeah. Except, of course, my people. Yeah. My side of the spectrum. Nobody is watching them anymore. So the guys are rather watching Russian Today or Al Jazeera to get up-to-date news. Yeah. But I agree with you. We are in for a rough ride in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And here's what's really bad about this is that, so here's the other thing about this. I didn't really go into detail about it. I mean, they're really pushing all the buttons to raise the tensions. This reminds me of the Spanish-American War. Remember the Maine. We sank our own ship in Havana to incense Americans into going to war. And it worked. We went to war with Spain and became a colonial power briefly in Asia and Latin America. But this is the same sort of thing. I mean, the Biden regime puts out there that U.S. intelligence has indicated a troop buildup and the Russians are imminent attacking. Now, in the intelligence community, you don't share information like that because you could burn sources and methods on how you know this information. But they put that stuff out there, and the only purpose for putting that out there is political. Either one for deterrence to get the Russians to back off, or one to distract from what's actually happening elsewhere, domestically or internationally. And I think it's the latter. I don't really think that this administration is savvy enough to actually understand what deterrence is. They're just trying to distract. Hey, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, the great and powerful Oz.
But I don't think Putin is going to back off. Russia is not going to back off this time. Yeah. Because they will lose credibility. They have warned NATO not to put weapons on his border, which they have been doing. And this one action has led to the point that if Russia backs down now, he loses all confidence of his own people, and he becomes the laughing stock of Biden.
Yeah, and nobody wants that.
If Trump was still in charge, this would never have happened.
Yeah, absolutely, that's true. The question that becomes now is if the Russians make a move, do they do it while the roads are frozen and not muddy and that sort of thing, or that they wait till the spring when the weather's better from a standpoint of for troops? But it's quite a frightening prospect. We're talking about war over the Ukraine. It feels like 1941, not 2021.
Yeah, but Chris, I got my own opinions about it. It is all this talks about peace, which the United Nations had broadcast over how many years. And if we go and look at history, we had a major world war type of thing every 40 years, which control population and bring the human values back to normal. And by peace, and prolonging the peacetime and no wars, people's values have changed. They've become absolutely clueless about what life is about. A war tends to bring people back, and they realize the value of life. So maybe the world needs a war. How bad that might sound, maybe the world needs a war. Well, and yes, what I'm saying is terrible, but I think that this time of the year, February especially, is high winter in Europe.
Yep.
And they are controlling the gas supplies. They got the ability to tap, or what does you call that thing? When you hijack a system, when you go into it, you hack. You hack into system. We have seen blackouts. And that was all due to Russian hackers. If they hack the European system, causing blackdowns, shut down the gas pipes, they are dying of cold. You know, even if you look at South Africa, where the harbors systems was hacked, and the offloading of Transnet and all those things went haywire, eventually, if you go back, you will find it's Russian hackers that did it. So they was testing their system over the past year or two, and I think they are ready. And now another thing which is interesting is the resignation of the German admiral, chief of their navy.
Yeah.
Because he said, but Crimea belongs to Russia. Which in fact is true, because if you go to Crimea, or he as a soldier goes to Crimea, Russians are going to shoot at him. So Russia controls Crimea. So in fact, who is controlling them? It's Russia. So he didn't lie, but it was politically incorrect. And I want to state another thing tonight. If we look at the conservative people in Europe, but now I'm putting my head on a stump in the guillotine. Okay?
Go ahead.
But the conservative people in Europe is going to take hands with Putin to get rid of the junk that has polluted their nations. Think about it.
Yeah, well, we definitely the bow's going to break here. This is just, I mean, it's, I just shake my head each and every day. It's insane. You know, what's interesting is that because of this effort that's been going on with this political use of this pandemic for the past now entering its third year nonsense, there's an interesting and eclectic group of people who are uniting against this all over the world. We've seen it in Australia for a long time now, for over a year. We've seen it in Europe, massive rallies again this weekend. Here in the U.S., yesterday I went and covered it as a journalist, the rally that was in D.C. Now, it paled in comparison to the rally that last year at the Capitol building and the Trump rally, which had at least 500,000 people, if not more, at those two things. This one had 20 to 30,000 present. I actually started at the Washington Memorial, walked down past the World War II Memorial, past the reflecting pool, and up. I got right up next to the steps there, so I had a really good spot on it. But from there, it's hard to judge the crowd because most of the crowd drops below you and steps, so you can't see everyone. But the press kind of confirmed what I thought, 20 to 30,000. But you know, I saw hippies dancing, you know, against these mandates and government compulsory actions, and black people, white people, mixed race people, Asians, Hispanics, young, old, veterans, people walking around with signs, vax Democrat, you know, against mandates. You know, people who've already had the jab who are angry that the state is trying to impose this on other people. If I were to take that crowd of people here to sit down and have a cup of coffee, I would, you know, in a normal circumstance, I'd be like, okay, guys, I got to go home now because most of these people really don't appeal to me. They're not my cup of tea. But what's interesting is that the state's overreach, its suppression of the population, is bringing together people from every element of the left and right and the center and coalescing against this nonsense. And it's about time. It's about time America's awakening. It took us a long time to do this after the rest of the world did it. And I'm embarrassed for my country, but it was good to see not a big crowd, but a very involved crowd. And actually a lot of the stuff the doctors had to say up on stage, I'm scratching my head wondering about some of the things I've been told for the last 2 years.
But Chris, you know, there's one issue of the Great Reset. I've never talked about it on my YouTube.
Or me. I don't know either.
But I'm watching it closely, and I don't watch or say anything about the vaccines and stuff. Smart. I don't take sides. I'm not vaxxed, and I'm not planning on doing it. But it's everybody's choice. I got family who did it, etc., etc. But a while ago, there was a guy that put something on the internet about the phases of the Great Reset. Mm-hmm. The first one was creating control by means of the virus, which is very dangerous. Everybody must take the protection of the jab, and we have saw how if you are jabbed, then you can't get it anymore. You can't distribute it. and then you had to add a second one, and then you had to add a third one, and then you had to add a booster, and it never stops. It's just continuing. So to link up with what you are saying is that the whole world is starting to come together against this forced or mandatory vaccination. But if you look at what that guy say about them, the next phase will be hacking and international blackouts and then a war.
Yep.
And now we see this huge uprising against the vaccination. So it's running out of steam.
Well, perhaps.
So it's now time for the next phase.
Well, perhaps. Yeah.
So we are going.
Yeah. They've got to go to the next phase because this one's running out of steam. Yeah, that's what I was going to say is that a lot of people are hopeful, but I mean, don't get too excited here because all the reins of power, the exclusive use of force belongs to most of these governments around the world. The one exception is the United States, where we have the Second Amendment here to protect our rights for the most part, although it's infringed upon by a number of states. But most places, like Australia, they've been disarmed. It's just sheep country out there now, and the state is oppressing people. So while there may be victories, in fact, we've seen here in the States, the Supreme Court struck down the Biden's administration's unconstitutional requirement for every company with 100 employees to get mandatory jabs and testing. They struck that down as unconstitutional. And then we saw prior to that in November or December that the Biden administration's requirement for all federal contractors, which is a big deal. The federal government relies on millions of contractors to perform services for it. They were going to be forced to be jabbed. That was struck down. Then this was struck down. But these are small victories. And there's a lot more on the table beyond this. And at the end of the day, Jacinda Ardern, Cyril Ramaphosa in the ANC, Boris Johnson, who's a Tory, this is a disgrace to the Tory party. The so-called Conservative Party is now out, so the leftists are in control in Germany. We've got, what's his name there, Justin Trudeau in Canada, and Joe Biden. All these people, and Emmanuel Macron, they still rule all these countries. And it's a scary thought. It's a long way to go before we get back to some degree of normalcy and liberty in this world. It's quite frightening what has happened over the past few years. It disturbs me.
But Chris, the person who still thinks that we will return to a normal as we know it are crazy. We will never return to a normal as we used to know it. It's changed. It's like how South Africa has changed over the past 25 years. The youngsters don't know how we lived before 1994.
Yeah.
We had no famine. There was jobs. Yes, there was apartheid, which there was more, there was less problems during apartheid than there is now in South Africa. I'm not saying apartheid was good.
No.
Okay,
no.
Purpose of
Just to make sure the audience is clear.
But you know, if we look at the security forces, the total number of activists that was killed by the security forces during the apartheid era was around about 680.
Yeah.
Between themselves, over the same period, it's almost 12,000 which was necklaced, burned to death, and brutally killed.
Yep.
And it is a huge misconception in the process. Now I forget how I got to this point. What did I start with?
Well, we were talking about apartheid, the difference comparing apartheid, how things function, electricity, roads, jobs, healthcare, compared to where South Africa is today.
Yeah, but I actually wanted to bring it back in connection to the Europe side. But anyway, Chris, the situation is deteriorating in South Africa at a huge pace. And the problem in the end of the day is that there is no control, there is no leadership, there's nobody to make a decision. I mean, if we look at Cyril Ramaphosa and his cabinet, the cabinet is supposed to be the people closest to the president. Mm-hmm. But a person in his cabinet now actually challenged him. It's like throwing down or drawing a line in the sand or hitting him with through his face, like in the old days when they challenged somebody to a duel. That's actually what has happened.
Yeah, it's going back to the point you made a moment ago about the differences here. It's if you add up. Now, the number hasn't been this high this entire 28 years. I took 27. I didn't count this year. 27 years since the elections in April 27th, 1994. There have been at least 591,000 murders in South Africa, in a country of about 60 million people today. Now, it was only about 43 million people or so back, in 1994, but 591,000 murders. That's an incredible level of violence. You'd be hard-pressed to find that number of murders in South Africa during the entire period of the National Party under apartheid from 1948 until 1994. It just didn't happen in those numbers. Now, some of those happened at the end, as you mentioned, the Nicklin and such, that occurred, but this is insane. 591,000 murders. And then, speaking of which, that's why I want to bring that up. So we've got reports again today coming in, at least 3 different farm attacks and murders taking place in South Africa overnight. This stuff just continues unabated. And where is Beckett Chile? I'm sure he's busy counting his doubloons or something like that.
Yeah, throughout the war in Angola, the total number of South Africans killed was round about 1,200, 1,400, round about that. And on the Cuban side and the Fopla side, it was more than that. But not in total 100,000 people. Not in total. Over a period of, let's say, 25 years, not 100,000 people was killed. There's more people being killed in South Africa now. It's more dangerous now in South Africa than it used to be. But I remember now the point that I wanted to make is that the youngsters grew up with this. They didn't know what we got before 1994. So they accept the changes as normal.
Yeah. And
I think that's a problem right throughout the world. Kids growing up in the United States now thinking to be woke is great. Yep. That's how you must be. And right throughout Europe, we get that situation. Now, not all kids are like that, of course.
Sure.
You got the kids that has been brought up properly by their parents, and they know what it's about. But generally speaking, if this thing is not being changed around, we are going to sit with kids that grow up wrong.
Well, we've got that now. You're absolutely right. Well, that's the problem we've got now is kids are growing up wrong. I mentioned this. I reported this inside the intelligence community back in the, I don't know, what's now been a decade ago, I think, or something like that. And I've talked about it extensively since I've started doing, after retirement from active service. And this was, it's so sad that under ANC rule, children, during the apartheid era, whether kids were black or colored, Indian or white, most kids aspired to become something. They wanted to be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer. They want to succeed in life, not a Toitsi, But now that's what kids aspire to be. I mean, in KZN, we saw well over 100 assassinations of ANC local counselors by other ANC local counselors or people that want to be a counselor because their path to wealth and success and fame is not becoming a doctor or a lawyer, a dentist, a farmer, a soldier, any of those things. It is to become an ANC cadre so you can get your fingers and hooks into the tenders and steal. That's a disgraceful outcome. And the sad part is that's the norm and expectation. Also, the other part about this now is you're conditioning the entire generation of South Africans to expect that someone owes them something and they have to go collect their SASSA grant once a month. Like that's the way things are supposed to be. That's only supposed to be a desperate situation for people in the worst conditions possible. But this has become the norm for over 17 million people in South Africa. It's quite frightening, Vine.
Yeah. And you must just remember the World Bank just gave another $750 million to South Africa.
Yep.
That's 11.4 billion rand. which brings the total debt of the country up to $160 billion.
Ooh.
How is a country like South Africa ever going to repay that?
Well, it's not with the economy failing and the junk bond status to borrow money. But it's interesting because I've reported out about extensively. I only watch your programs occasionally because I have a hard time keeping up with my Afrikaans. It's not quite as advanced as it should be. But I've reported about extensively, so you may have too. I don't know, but I've been going off ever since July and August of 2020, reporting because no one's talking about it. The African Development Bank gave the ANC $285 million in July of 2020. The New Development Bank, or the BRICS Bank, of which South Africa is a member with China and others, gave South Africa $1 billion in August. And the International Monetary Fund gave them $4.3 billion. That's $5.6 billion. And I've got people, even well-educated people, well-informed around the world, are talking to me about how, the West is doing nothing to help people out. Well, they're propping up the ANC with this money. That's $5.6 billion. That was 90 billion rand at the exchange rate at the time because it was a different rate. So where did that money go? We haven't seen it. And now the World Bank gives them another 11.4 billion. And of course, where's that going to go? Somebody's pocket. This is supposed to be for energy. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Some of their pockets are very deep.
Yeah, they are. They're deeper than the gold mines in the Midrand.
Exactly. Exactly. One of my guys came to see me this afternoon. He's on holiday, and he is working for Sibanye Stillwater gold mine. He said that since November of last year, there was no production because there was an accident, and 4 people died in the accident. So the mine was stopped for an investigation to continue. Now, this investigation only recently started because everybody was on holiday. That mine is still not producing anything in the past 2 months.
Jeez.
And you know what? Now all the unions are striking for a pay rise, but there's no production. And he said you can see that the mine management is busy moving away. And in the end, that mine will remain, and all the Zamas will go down it, and they will mine it.
Yeah, and they'll get killed, and then there'll be a big, these informal miners, this is terrible. And that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me bring some of the stuff in from the chat here very quickly. White Diamond Child says, I wish I would get a reminder on YouTube when Chris is on. I have to search everywhere I need to view the stream. Yes, White Diamond Child, there is clearly shadow banning on my channel. We know that. So my recommendation to you and everyone watching this stream right now is please join the Telegram announcements group. Here's the advantage of Telegram. I'm not pimping that platform. You can go to Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, whatever you want to use. But with Telegram, if you don't want people to see your mobile number, you can hide it. And I do that to protect your privacy. So in the announcements group, I am the only one to post. There are no moderators that control content. Only I do it, and only I post there. So the only thing you'll find in there, by and large, are announcements of all of my videos, my live streams, my prepared videos. You will see I've started putting a few different things in there, like a video or a link to something or a commentary news article, but that's rare. That's rare. Everything in there. So if you sign up for the Telegram announcements group, which Hendo has just put in there, it's free. If you don't want people to know your name, you can mess around with the name, call yourself Madiba if you want, whatever, what you want in there. But do that, please, and then you'll get updated on it. And that's the best way to make sure you stay informed, because YouTube won't let people know about this stuff. Now, Arctic, who's a pilot, says he was telling Erica that they carried 80% less passengers to Durban's in December than December of 2019. So in December of 2021, and he said the riots, he thinks that tourism is dead in KZN. Well, I can't disagree with that. I'd be surprised to see it. Oh, there have been people on the beaches, but they're not people coming from outside of the Durban area. They're just people from down there. So yeah, when you have an insurrection, it sort of is bad news for tourism, wouldn't you say?
But the mainstream media in South Africa say it was a better December than ever before.
Yeah, right.
So the amount of lies that is being distributed by the liberal press is incredible.
Yeah.
But of course, yeah, they are the only ones that is publishing anything or bring out newspapers because they got all the money from the liberal side.
Well, in fact, a good
There's
example.
there's not one conservative newspaper left in South Africa. I think I will have to bring one out.
Oh no, that's they've been gone for ages. Yeah, it's time to bring one out. Now, I'm actually writing for Roman Kabinak's Morning Shot, which is probably the closest thing to a conservative voice in South Africa, but that's a small operation. Maybe it'll pick up. Stevie says Sightlanders needs a Telegram group as well. Maybe, I don't know. You have to talk to, maybe he can help out with that, but that's something you might consider. The Telegram groups are helpful, but go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, I know there's the thing about Telegram and the people want one group, etc. But if you look at only on my side of the Sightlanders, I personally got 16 different groups that I'm handling on WhatsApp. The total number of personnel listed on those are in the excess of 5,000 people. That's only my part. How do I change the names over to Telegram to ensure that everybody is still getting the messages? And that's the problem, because for years all the people have lined up. If you look at the civilian side of Sightlanders, they got almost 200,000 people. So how do you change over to a Telegram group? It's extremely difficult. Although there's certain subdivisions that do have Telegram groups, but they're smaller groups. Or let's say subdivisions, or a guy who's putting his platoon together in that, or what else, But it is very difficult. And I understand that the people want the Telegram, but it's practical, impossible. But I must say the following. In South Africa, WhatsApp is as safe as Telegram, Signaler, or any other group. Because during the past, you guys also got it, where you got this parliamentary committees overseeing certain departments, etc. And the Department of Intelligence, where it comes to monitoring social media, voice recordings, or voice chat and SMS, the judge who is approving the people to listen in on another guy's phone, she testifies before the standing committee. And she said that, first of all, they are misusing the system to spy on each other. The politicians are spying on each other with this system. Furthermore, there was a collapse in the equipment. So they don't have the ability in South Africa to monitor Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram, or anything. The only ability that they got left is voice and SMS. And the money to upgrade or rectify this problem is not available. It's not there. Because most of the money is going into salaries and not into the hardware to run the department. And I mean, that was said in Parliament.
Yeah, no doubt. But I mean, look, I've known about these problems with the South African Intelligence Service for longer than most people, and you probably as well. But I know because of my role behind the wire in the intelligence community. And now this is not disclosing classified information, but because this was in the public sector. But there was, when Ronnie Kasrils was the Minister for Intelligence back in the day, 2004, 2008 timeframe, even though he was a diehard, longtime member of the ANC and became radicalized after Sharpeville back in 1960, so he'd been with the cause a long time. Here we are talking over 40 years later. He's the Minister of Intelligence under an ANC government. They spied on him. They put listening devices in his home and his office, but they were so inept that he found them pretty easily. You know, not that Kaz was his great intelligence operator, but he found them. And, you know, this is so embarrassing that they you know, it's just, it's inept. It really is. And on this side, you know, the problem is that they're not inept. We're quite adept at intelligence collection on this side. And we have people violating the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. As a former counterintelligence agent, one of the things I did was, of course, I had to get warrants. You know, if we had to listen to an American, we had to have a valid cause. I've had warrants denied, which seemed reasonable. I had warrants approved, which were legitimate for someone that was suspected of espionage against the United States as an American citizen. But you couldn't just spy on them. But we saw the Obama administration weaponize these agencies, illegally use our signals intelligence collection to spy on Carter Page and on General Flynn, on Trump himself. Then when Trump became president, they were still spying on him. This is sick and twisted. It's really, really scary. But the sad part on our side is that they're very good at it. You know, it's whereas on the South African side, they've really lost the capacity. It's not there anymore. And, you know, that's good.
But you must remember, Chris, in the United States, you got the mechanics to do that. You got the supercomputers, the stuff that can pick up the words and do everything.
Yep.
So with less personnel, you can do much, much more.
True.
And I think that's the advantage of the United States over most other countries. In South Africa, of course, they must now rely on the human factor. And the human factor is so unreliable. I think from 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon until at least on Monday morning, 12 o'clock, you can say what you want. Yeah. Because nobody will attend anything to listen.
Oh, you mean, so it's like Parliament. There's nobody watching.
Yeah, it went down, no guards.
Oh, my goodness. Sorry, it's just a sad state of affairs.
Who was that British guy that wanted to blow up the British Parliament?
Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes.
Yeah, 37. Yeah, Guy Fawkes. That's right. Yeah. That's where the name comes from. Yeah. He stacked 57 barrels of black power.
Yep.
Gunpowder into the Parliament, but he was caught. Now, for a whole weekend, there's no security at Parliament. What if somebody wants to do the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah, what if they could have taken out the whole cabinet and half the Parliament, you know, and no one would have known. This guy spent 30 hours in there. You know, everything we were told initially turns out to all be fraudulent information. Patricia Little comes out there. We were told that the fire department responded within 6 minutes. Yeah, 6 minutes of being called, which is impressive by the fire department. But it turns out he started the fire 3 hours prior to that. It was burning for 3 hours before anyone called the fire department. And we were told by the government that they went and found this guy. Apparently, he was in the building trying to be captured. He was yelling out the window, and the firefighters ignored him. And then the cops finally came and arrested him. This is unreal. This is what happened in the Parliament. It's crazy.
But remember, we are part of Africa.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is Africa.
And that's one of the big mistakes that the people in South Africa is making. They don't see South Africa as part of Africa. Yeah. Africa north of the borders differs completely, according to them. And it can't happen in South Africa. And it is happening. That's the point.
Yep.
I mean, if you really go and look at countries like Congo, Brazza, you will see more development going on in those countries now than you will see in South Africa. And that is shocking.
That's sad. It's a sad state of affairs. The capital, the markets, the capability, capacity is all in South Africa. You know, it's interesting. Speaking of fires, Waterkloof had an explosion in a fuel facility yesterday. What's that all about? I mean, this is a major airbase there in Pretoria, Waterkloof, and we've heard nothing come out of it yet. I don't know if you've heard anything, but I don't know if that's a consequence of falling apart, services falling apart, or sabotage, or what's going on.
No. You know, interesting, there's a lot of speculation about that, and it's all flying over the internet, and I just watch and listen.
Yeah.
And then one of my guys came back and say, didn't they try to steal fuel? And that somebody probably light a match to see what they are doing with the stealing of the fuel. And that caused the explosion. Remember how many times has that happened in Africa?
Yeah.
Where a tanker falls over, fuel is spilling, people are gathering there and they're collecting the fuel in cans, and then somebody do something stupid and the next moment everything blows up.
Yep.
It's quite possible that somebody try to steal fuel.
Well, that's exactly what my thoughts are on the whole matter too. You know, I don't think anybody has any desire to sabotage Waterkloof to what end. Yeah, to me, it's probably people trying to say, we saw this with an overturned fuel tanker just in West Africa just a couple of months ago, and like 70 people got killed when the thing exploded. You know, it's just, you're right about that. People just rushing out there. I mean, it's like if you saw that recent cash in transit heist that took place on the I think it was on the N7 or something like that a couple of days ago. And all these people running around like nut jobs trying to collect all the Rand notes on the ground, snarfing them up, scratching them up, you know. And I'm thinking to myself, who raised you people? That isn't your money. I don't care how hungry you are. When I was in poverty, I didn't steal from people. I would never have walked away with that money. I would have stood there and guarded the site, you know, and protected, you know, until the cops came or something like that. But no, not in Africa, man. It's a free-for-all. It's free money, man. Come get it.
But the problem in South Africa is insurance.
Yeah.
They know very well. Every truck that they loot is insured. So, and that's why the police are not actually responding, because they say, well, the guy is not losing anything. He claimed from the insurance.
Right.
I had a very similar situation in Namibia, where a truck of mine was driving with a cargo of maize on the back up to Rundu. And as you go down those little mountains at the entrance from the south of Windhoek, the Kommas Hooglande, and as you drive down there, the hook on the trailer snapped. So it ran straight down. He didn't fall over until he reached the bottom, and there he just stepped over. Mm-hmm. And when the driver called me, I immediately called a friend of mine there in Windhoek. I said, Gert, please go and have a look at what is happening there. And he loaded 2 security guards with some box, and they went out there. And when they arrived there, most of the whole load was already being scratched into bags and carried away to cars that was parked there. And he said to me, nothing is going to happen. We can't stop them. The police are there. They are not stopping them. And all the police said, well, you must claim from the insurance. The bad part is I was not insured.
Well, you know, but that callous attitude, you know, just let the insurance pay for it. First off, people are paying premiums, and the more premiums, the more that they pay out, the higher the premiums get. So it's not a cost-free thing. That's for, and more importantly, the human cost. I mean, I've just watched far too many of these gruesome videos of cash in transit. One I saw in 2020, late 2020, was a guy walks out, a white guy, a bit overweight, and he's walking out, and a bucky pulls up, and like 7 guys jump out of the back of it with AKs. They run up. And they come up from behind him. He doesn't resist. He doesn't look at him. He looks straight ahead. He goes. He opens the door for them. He puts his arms up. He backs up, and the guy behind him has a handgun, and he pushes him to the ground and takes him stand on the ground. So he lays down with his arms out like this. They take all the money. They're all wearing balaclavas, so you can't see their faces. He never saw the vehicle. He couldn't identify any of these people. And then he puts the gun down, the white guy, and executes him with a shot to the back of the head. I mean, the human cost, and you see these things blown up, the drivers in these things killed and burned alive, and there's just total callous disregard for human life. When we saw, was it Leo Prinsloo, the guy in Hatfield who had that was amazing. I was really excited to see that when they tried to take him in Hatfield in broad daylight, and it was a cell phone shipment. It wasn't even cash. And his response, along with the young security guard next to him, was just unbelievable. But the thing is that shouldn't be happening in broad daylight in South Africa. I mean, that's the sort of activity you expect to occur late at night when somebody's making a security drop at the bank or something like that. But this is South Africa in 2021. This is the ANC's paradise. This is what the liberation struggle was all about. Let us get everything for ourselves and our cadre. The hell with the rest of South Africans.
Yeah, true. Leo Prinsloo, of course, is a well-known former task force member of the police, and he kept his cool very well there.
Yes, he did. It was amazing.
And I mean, he's handling everything. He's trying to talk to this guy next to him and tell him, just phone the escort to find out where they were. And this guy just sat there with big eyes. And of course, the police wanted to make him the hero.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let's forget about that.
Yeah.
He did a magnificent job. But those type of guys are hard to find.
Yeah.
It was probably an accident, or the absence of the driver that made Leo drive the truck that day.
Yeah. Because
that caliber of guy, I don't think security companies can really afford them, number one. And to have all driving like Leo, if that was possible, this whole hijacking things will take down all this cash in transit heist. But I must say that in South Africa, that has become normal. So what do? You just pull off the road, you turn around, you find another route around it, you put it on a WhatsApp group and say, guys, don't go there.
Oops, I think we lost you there.
That's it. It has become normal, because
it has
also become normal to kill people.
It's the disregard.
60 killings a day in South Africa.
It's 21,000 a year. It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
But now become a moral dilemma. To what point can you allow this to continue? At what point responsible citizens can allow this before they have to react, to do something, to at least rescue something? But that's dangerous talk. If you talk like this, you probably end up in prison very quickly.
Well, look, it's probably your white privilege. That's what's confusing here. Talking about people's safety and welfare. It's crazy. Now, it's listen. I remember a few years back, there was a situation on the R21 in the Midrand going down towards OR Tambo, Kempton Park, that way on the R21, where they were standing on overpasses and dropping concrete blocks down on the motorway to disable cars. And they were raping the occupants and robbing them. Fortunately, they weren't murdering these people, but they were men and women were being raped by these guys, and they were robbing them. And then just, and can you imagine driving down the highway and all of a sudden a cinder block falls in front of you and knocks your axle off and you're spinning out of control and you get in a ditch and you're like, whew, I'm alive, only to be drug out of a vehicle and raped. And the response from SAPS was not only pathetic, but it was inhumane. They didn't really seem to care about this. Same like years ago when they're throwing people off a train, in the Midrand. This gang was going on trains, people commuting to work, and just grabbing people and throwing them off the train and people falling to their deaths. That was about 15 years ago. And none of this stuff gets any press. The world doesn't know about this stuff.
Yeah. There between Mossel Bay and George, over December, there was a couple of accidents where people was also killed. But what they did there is they took a truck tire with the steel rim inside. Mm-hmm. And as the car come up the hill, they roll it from the top. Mm. And the car ran into it. It goes underneath the car and it flipped over. The people got robbed and some people even got killed. Mm. And up to now, no arrests. But yeah, it's a huge problem in South Africa. The dropping of the stones from the top. When I have to drive at night on the highway or the freeway, then I will normally as I approach the bridge in the left lane, I will switch over to the right lane when I passed underneath.
Yeah.
At the last moment, I will switch. But now you must concentrate on doing that to avoid possible actions.
Yeah.
But you know, how many people have been murdered that stopped next to the freeway just to check their GPS to make sure they're going into the correct or right direction? How many people has been killed for stopping to refuel, or they ran out of fuel, they stopped there, and then they found somebody to bring fuel.
Well, that happened.
For those people,
that happened in the R21 last year. This young couple, the young man, they were like 19 or 21 years, with a black friend in the car.
Yes.
They ran out of petrol and they murdered them. They just executed them for no reason. They robbed them and then executed them, and it's unbelievable.
And nothing stolen.
No, exactly.
The point is, you know, people must remember that darkness is your friend. Whenever you pick up a problem at night and you have to stop, move away 30, 40 meters into the grass and the bushes and lie flat down there. Leave your car and all your belongings. Go there. They will never find you. Because night and darkness is the best thing to hide people. And I know how bad it is to leave your car and all your possessions inside.
But you'd rather have a life.
But you rather have your life.
Yep.
So move into the bushes, lie down, and call from there somebody to come to help. So your first action should be, when you stop next to the road, get out, get into the bush, lie down flat, then call, not the other way around.
Yeah, no, the growth, the bush can definitely be your friend, even in daylight. I mean, you know, when Zipra shot down the Air Rhodesia flight over Kariba, and they came in, the plane landed, they managed to survive this horrific crash, incredible landing, and then those were around the plane and those trapped in the fuselage. Others went to get help, and Zipper came up and murdered those who survived. But those who were in the bush, in the weeds, they managed to hide in the weeds and survived until security forces saved them. But you're right, at nighttime, listen, here's the thing. Most of these people who are so callous about life aren't courageous. They're either just idiotic or they're just callous. If you go into the bushes, they're probably as afraid of the dark as anyone else. You know, they're not going to follow you necessarily. In most cases, it's rare unless you have a trained operative. But most of these people aren't trained operatives. They're either parts of syndicates or they're crimes of opportunity, or they're it's not like these are SFA Special Forces troops that know what they're doing in the dark. So it's a good point. Good advice there. Good advice. Yep. Crazy stuff.
Opportunists, that's what they are. And it's not going to go away, Chris.
No, it's not.
It's going to increase. And as people are suffering more and more, we must accept the fact that we will have more and more of this robberies type of things and hijackings and everything. It will just continue and it will increase. Your life is becoming less and less valuable. There's no value on life in South Africa. But I shouldn't go there. But if you go and read the book 3 Days of Terror, it was written by a guy with the surname of Texeiro. And 3 Days of Terror is about the initiation of the war in Angola against the Portuguese, where they moved in and they killed all inhabitants of 3 towns in one night. A coordinated effort under the command of Holden Roberto, who was the FNLA leader at the time. Yep. And they became the FNLA later on. And you know what? 2 people escaped. A butcher and his daughter who were standing in the upper story and saw something was wrong in the streets. And they was able to shoot their way out. But the most horrific stories are what happened to those people. And you know what? Holden Roberto was never held to account for what he did. The Western journalists refused to believe what these people who was in the fight told them.
Yep.
Even the proof of photos, which was in the reprinting of the books, removed from the book because it's too gruesome. But the media refused to believe it because it's not possible that people can be that violent. Now, in the very same sense, Mugabe and all those people with the atrocities which they have done are never going to be held accountable. Okay, Mugabe is dead, but we all know that Mnangagwa was the man behind it. But there will be no consequences. And that's the problem in Africa. They can do what they want. There is no consequences. They can do what they want in South Africa. There is no consequences. I mean, how many people has been arrested for corruption in South Africa?
Yeah, very few, and none prosecuted and convicted for the most part. Yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly. Now, if the state, the government cannot function properly, how must the country function properly?
Well, it's a good question, but I've got nicknames for some of your departments there, your ministries in South Africa. I call Ronnie Lamola's department the Department of Injustice because it doesn't prosecute criminals, and I call Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's Department of Traditional Affairs and Cooperative Governance the Department of Non-Traditional Affairs and Irrational Governance. That's what I call that. So and then of course you've got Ibrahim Patel, the Minister of No Trade. That's his main function, is to ensure there's no trade in South Africa. But seriously, it's and it's even worse than that, Vine. And I'm sure you're aware of this. But when we decided to play a role in Angola, the U.S. government, we put our money behind Holden Roberto in the FNLA, the most useless of the three movements out there. And the one that had the weakest support, at least Savimbi had massive support in his part of the country, and the MPLA had control of the state. So, no, we backed Holden Roberto. It was a total disaster, and he got to live to the ripe old age of 84. Didn't die until 2007, despite the misery that happened in the Congo. Of course, the reason we backed Roberto is because of his ties to Mobutu, and of course Mobutu was our guy in Zaire, so that's probably why we backed him. But the CIA was behind that, and it was a disaster, and it led to federal laws that kept us from intervening and other things when we should have been intervening. But anyway, Angola was a disaster for us.
Yeah, but Chris, an interesting thing while you are talking about Mobutu. Mobutu was also South Africa's only ally in Africa.
Well, Malawi, you had, but that doesn't really
count. Yeah, but to a lesser stage,
yeah.
So South Africa provides them with food. What is the staple diet in South Africa? It is maize, pap. Yeah, pap. Yep. And that's what they today are eating in the DRC. Still, they want pap. Right across the river in Brazzaville, Congo, they don't eat pap.
They eat rice.
They don't eat maize. No, cassava.
Cassava, okay, sure.
And the people always ask me, but how is it possible that the guys on the other side of the river is eating maize and the guys on this side refuse to eat maize? I said, it's simple. Mobutu was South Africa's ally. He received all his aid food from South Africa in the form of maize. But this is just for interesting sake.
No, it's a good point because, it's funny because people assume things that they associate with a place to be from there. I mean, and foodstuffs are a good example of that. So, for instance, growing up, I just assumed potatoes were from Ireland, because the Irish potato famine, that's a big part of American history, the Irish coming over here. Of course, I didn't know that as a young kid, but I was a farmer, and as I became a farmer, I discovered that actually it comes from the Americas. And then, a lot of Africans think the chickens come from Africa. No, they come from Asia. And a lot of West Africans who eat rice assume it's African. No, it's also from Asia. And the list goes on and on. In Southern Africa, most Southern Africans I meet assume that maize actually comes from Southern Africa. No, it comes from the Americas. It's interesting how people they identify a particular type of food with a place, and they think that's where it comes from. So your story is really interesting, and it's great that we can share that with people so they get that whole point. There's a reason why people eat certain things, do certain things. There's a reason why Americans love coffee. we were British colonies and we drank tea just like the Brits did. But because of the revolution, because of the unfair tax, they repealed the Stamp Act of 1765, taxed a whole series of goods, and people rose up against it in 1765. And so the king rescinded the tax against everything except tea. The tax was high on tea, so they had the Boston Tea Party. They dumped all the tea in there, dressed up as Indians. They dumped all the tea in there, and it became unpatriotic to drink tea. So Americans, by and large, abandoned tea, and we fell in love with, not me, but Americans fell in love with coffee, and that's why America became a coffee nation, drinking nation, not a tea nation. We drink tea in this country now, but it was unpatriotic then.
Because of that, you have just moved up one notch in respect. Because I don't drink tea at all. I did couple of times in my life when I wanted to be, I would say decent in front of other people. I will accept tea, but it's only because there's no coffee.
Yeah. Well,
coffee will always be the thing.
It's interesting that you say that because, well, here's the thing. While I say that, I'm not a fan of coffee. I think it's an evil substance invented by Satan to enslave mankind. What I mean by that is you see the people who are addicted to the caffeine. If they don't get that coffee in the morning, they're really difficult to deal with. I'm just kidding, of course, but coffee is, but I'm serious. It's not one of my favorite drinks, but Americans love coffee. They absolutely love it. Oh, somebody in the chat just asked, what is cassava? Cassava is a starch that is grown extensively in West Africa and also in the tropical regions of Central Africa. And they use it to make fufu, which is, it looks like pop, but it doesn't taste the same. And while I don't like pop, I detest fufu. So I'm not a pop fan, and I detest fufu.
That also comes from cassava, from the cassava plant, which is actually growing under the ground and becomes bigger and bigger. It's a root. It's not a yearly thing. You can leave it. And it will keep on growing and become bigger and bigger. Yeah. But cassava can be very dangerous if you are not treating it correctly.
Yep.
It can be poisonous.
Poisonous, yeah, it's deadly if it's not treated properly. That's right. Yeah. It's got to be soaked. There's a proper way to prepare it. But it's very popular in West Africa. Nigerians, Ghanaians love it. I detest it. I think it tastes vile. Every time I had a meal in Liberia, they put fufu on the plate, and I'm like, no thanks. No goat, no fufu.
you can put two spoons of curry inside it. It's still tasting bad. Exactly.
You can't disguise it. That's like the old days of taking malaria drugs. What did we used to take back in the day? I can't remember. But the early malaria drugs, you could wrap them in bread and squish it down, eat and put it in your mouth and try to swallow it without chewing it, and you could still taste the nasty taste from malaria pills. I hate it. Chloroquine or something like that. It was really nasty. It's no wonder wonder the cockies were. I mean, the Brits were always sorry. I fell back in a habit there. No wonder the Brits were always drinking their tonic water so they could protect themselves with the quinine in it. At least that way they could stomach it. But yeah, malaria stuff. Anyway, cassava. Yeah, no, cassava is not my cup of tea. And look, I don't like pop either. I don't get why Southern Africans like it. It's not you can't put enough flavoring in that to make that palatable for me. Now, I will eat seswa though. I like seswa. Have you had seswa? It's a Tswana sort of thing. It's the pounded meat. It's seasoned.
No, I don't know that specifically. But when we went up to the Congo.
Yeah.
As the group of 30 farmers to establish there and start farming, we ran out of course, meat that we took with us, and the only meat that we could get at that time was chicken, and they call it quiche. That is the leg and the part that's fixed to the leg, but it's very nice, and it was imported from Texas.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was actually very great. But now, being Boeren, they became gatvol for chicken very quickly. so one day I came to the guy, and again he was braaiing chicken because he had nothing else. I say, now, but there's a layer of spice on it that you can't believe it. He looked at me and he said, Wynand, now I'm spicing it so that it tastes like sheep, mutton.
Yikes. Oh, there's breaking
Yeah.
news here real quick. Someone mentioned that the president of Burkina Faso has been kidnapped. Soldiers are mutinying right now in Burkina Faso.
Yes.
Now, this is without even reading the story of what's going on. This has happened in the last hour. This just occurred. But this is likely a consequence of the fact that the government is not protecting people, kidnappings, murders, villages being attacked and looted. This has been going on for several years. Burkina Faso, who was a poor but peaceful country just a decade ago, was drug into this conflict with these Islamists in the Sahel, and the government was ill prepared for it. So, wow, they've got Mark Christian Kabore. Wow, he's it's crazy stuff here. So they've detained him. That's a breaking story. We'll have to take a look into that. But it just, shift gears a little bit here, Vine, is that West Africa, the Sahel, what a disaster. What a basket case between Boko Haram, which is much less of a threat now than it has been in the past. But Boko Haram in Nigeria, the pastoralists and the herder and the sedentary farmers, this conflict going on there. And then also you've got all these different jihadist groups and criminal syndicates and traffickers in the Sahel. It is almost impossible to govern that region. I was stationed in both Niger and Mauritania, so I was in two major parts of the Sahel. It's just crazy. These governments are ill-equipped, ill-resourced, and poor governance, and it's not going to end anytime soon. This is crazy. They've kidnapped the president. Well, we'll see what happens.
Well, that's the mark of Africa. That's how it is in Africa. The strongest survive.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at Denis Sassou Nguesso of Brazzaville, Congo, he is now the longest president in Africa.
Yep.
And he's not going anywhere. If there is any people, you know what happened during the previous elections in the Congo when I was there still? They just were unannounced. They switch off all communications. Internet, cell phone towers, nothing. For a period of 2 weeks. And the family in South Africa is now immediately worried because there's no communication. What is going on? And you are not allowed to drive while the elections is going on. So it's a total control situation. Now, when the ANC say in South Africa, we must adapt to Africa economy and African styles, that's exactly what it means. Mm-hmm. Total control. Because the strongest is the leader and he got the right to take for him what he wants. Democracy don't work for them. We must remember that. We can have this ideal idea in our heads about democratize Africa. You can't. That's not their culture. That's not their way. Yep. Democracy can only be used as a tool to get into power. But then when you need to stay in power, then anything is possible. And that people must realize in South Africa. You know, Jacob Zuma has not gone away. Magashule has not gone away. Lindwili Sisulu is part of those groups.
Yep.
We have just seen the tip of the problems, which is going to start arising now, real problems. But we being westerly orientated, mm-hmm. we see democracy, and if you lose, then it's fine, then you go out and it's over and out. But here it don't works like that.
Yep.
So you will only win at the ballot box as far as you are backing the correct horse. Mm-hmm. The moment it changes and that horse don't want to go, that's when Africanism, how does they call it in South Africa? Africanicity, something like that.
Yeah,
no
doubt about
that
it.
Means, yeah, that means Africans never let go or something like that. But Africanicity is exactly the same with the politics in Africa and South Africa. And I have my hands full to tell people it's fine to go to court and challenge the government. It's fine to write petitions. But in the end, the result that they want is the result that we will have. Because that's how it works in Africa.
Yep. No, it's a fair point. Absolutely fair point. Let me take a couple things in from the chat here. Sharon Westfall says, Colonel, do you like biltong? Of course, I love biltong. I love kudu biltong. I love biltong generally. But I'll be honest, there's a company in Botswana that makes biltong that I prefer over all South African biltong. I can't think of the name right now, but I love biltong. I love the chili bites, and then they're chili flavored. It's good stuff. I would always, in traveling South Africa, I'd load up on biltong and then Energade. Especially the blue flavor, when that and the cherry, or the grape and the blue Energade to drive around. So Erica's saying walkie-talkies. No, chicken feet and beaks, there are things that don't come into my diet. I'm sorry. Chicken walkie-talkies are not part of my. And then I think it was Arctic said, oh, relax. He's just taking a break, referring to President Kabore of Burkina Faso. He's on a break. That's good. I like that. He's on a break. Yeah. Well, I guess. Anyway, but yeah. So no, you make a very valid point about things in Africa. The democracy is a veneer of governance in much of the continent of Africa, and a lot of people crowed about how so many African countries became democracies. But look at 2021 and where 2022 has already started at coup after coup after coup after coup all over West Africa, the Sahel, and even in East Africa. And we've got states that have no real reason to be at war with themselves, like Ethiopia attacking Tigray. And this war isn't over. It's a disaster. You have the lack of governance in Cabo Delgado province, which leads to a bunch of ghouls who pretend that they're an Islamist group to get attention while they're robbing and raping and murdering and having a good old time up there. But they have no desire to be in governance. That's not what they have. No end state like that. They're just taking advantage of the vacuum of security because there has never been an adequate security presence or governance in Cabo Delgado, including throughout the entire period of Portuguese colonization. It's just never had it. And you've got that. You've got the Central African Republic, which is still a basket case. And you've got the entire Sahel, Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, conflict all over the place, all the way over to Darfur. That's still a problem going on. We've got Sudan, in which the government is now, an illegal military coup taking place there. I mean, that's all just in the last year. I'm not trying to sound down on Africa, but you have to be an honest person when you talk about Africa, especially if you want to live and work in Africa or interact with it. You can't put on, rose-colored sunglasses and go, oh, we are the world. We are the people. Come on. No. The reality is that you have to put your big boy pants on. Africa's not for sissies. You really got to have open eyes when you're dealing with the continent of Africa.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's like Leonardo DiCaprio's famous words, TIA, this is Africa. And that's a fact. And we, by the day, are becoming more like the rest of Africa. And people just don't see it. But anyway,
yeah.
The next couple of weeks will teach us a lot of what is happening. In what way we are going, but yeah.
Well, it is interesting. You talked about, we kind of alluded to it early in the program, is the situation inside the ANC, which we've talked about before, this insanity where this party is at war with itself. We're seeing it playing out in the radical economic transformation faction. I thought initially this op-ed didn't get any attention. It was actually published right after you and I spoke last time, Lindiwe Sisulu's op-ed, in which she attacks the judiciary. And it's getting a lot of press in South Africa because someone caught on to it, and then it was repeated in publications because they wanted to play out this war in the ANC factions. But what gets me about it is that the entire op-ed is incredibly insulting, demeaning, and racially driven. It's a racist narrative. It is race hustling. And there's no comment about the racism inherent in there. It's just, these judges are basically trying to be, Uncle Tom's is what it's saying. But that's an eternal fight in the ANC. But the other issue here is the attack on minorities in South Africa, which she just, the vile language is in there. I mean, frankly, with South Africa's law, one could, go file a charge against her for violating South Africa's law. That's hate speech that she put in that op-ed. But, of course, that's not going to happen, and she would never be charged anyway. So,
yeah, nothing will happen.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that one, Chris.
Yeah, the other thing about her, too, is that when this happened, people said, why is she doing this? I said, well, I mean, it's obviously part of this ongoing struggle, but that's part of it. But it also might be an effort by her and her last chance to maybe, get the attention and play the game. Is Cyril weak enough that, maybe somebody can rise up against him when they have the conference and stand against him? I think that might be a piece of it. But at the end of the day, I think she's just got an inferiority complex, It's all part of this, but I mean, she'll never live up to the shadow of Walter and I'm blanking her mother's name right now, but her parents never live up to Alberta and Walter Sisulu never live up to that legacy of what they did. And she's just an empty vessel who's done nothing in life except live off the taxpayer for 28 years in one successive failure as a minister of this, minister that, minister this, minister that. And, you know, they didn't make her minister right away. She had to wait 6 years to get that. Now she's just a failure looking for attention. Failure looking for attention.
But she's every time she's in cabinet.
Yeah, no, she's been in the cabinet since around 2000, 21 years now, and from 94, she's been in parliament since 94, but in cabinet since then. She's been the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Tourism, and you know they shuffle her up just like all of them. That's if people take a look at who's are in the cabinet, there are about half of them have been in cabinet the entire time since the ANC's been in power, almost the entire time, and nobody ever comments on that. I mean, what have they done in life to become qualified as the Minister of Human Settlements or the Minister of Cooperative Governance or the Minister of Defense? Nothing at all whatsoever. It's crazy. Now, Frederick Erasmus says Ghana is the only country in Africa that never had a war or even sent their troops to any war conflict. Actually, that's not a true statement, Frederick. Now, if you're talking about post-independence Ghana, yes, they've never gone to war with another state. That's true. But Ghana has a long history of warfare. The Ghanaians, the Ashanti, fought the Brits off for almost 6 decades. They defeated the Brits repeatedly. It wasn't until the Brits got clever and stole the king's stool that they finally submitted and they broke the Ashanti. So in the 19th century, there was extensive, in fact, you know, if it wasn't for malaria and the endless wars that the Brits had to fight to get control of Ghana, Ghana would have a massive white population today. But malaria and those wars kept it from growing because they put tens of thousands of immigrants came in there and they either died or the war affected them. And then since they become an independent republic, Ghana has sent many troops on UN peacekeeping missions, which has put them in a combat zone. It wasn't supposed to be combat, but I think Frederick's point is that Ghana doesn't go to war with its neighbors. It's a peaceful country. If that's your point, Frederick, I agree with you. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, and there's also a country that is growing extremely well. Lots of people moving their businesses to Ghana because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
a stable country.
It is. It does have some challenges, but I mean, I think in Africa, I'd rather have Ghana's challenges than a lot of other countries' challenges. One of which is there's been extensive borrowing and the debt load has increased, and it's not the first time in Ghana, so they have to be careful of that. They also have to be careful not to succumb to the resource curse. So far, so good. I mean, between gold and petroleum, there really hasn't been much in the way of corruption like you see in South Africa, try to pilfer those resources and you know, make the country overly dependent on that. But a lot of people don't realize that, of course, Ashanti Gold was a big gold production company there. They merged with Anglo, became Anglo Ashanti, and so that's one of the world's largest gold producers now. And they produce a lot of gold in Ghana, among other places in Africa. But yeah, it's as long as they avoid that resource curse and they keep good governance, I think they'll be okay. It's they're putting a lot of effort into primary and secondary education, which is important. More money as they can into healthcare, which is also helpful. And they've done a fair amount of infrastructure development around Takoradi and Accra and along the coast. Not so much up country, which is needed, but along the coast, which will facilitate, you know, imports and exports and production, which is good stuff. And it's I don't know if you've been to Ghana, but it's an amazing place. Really wonderful people, really friendly. I've been all over the country.
Yeah, no, I've never been to Ghana, but what I heard and what I read about them concludes with what you are saying. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting place, but listen, it's with what's going on in South Africa. It's interesting. You guys got this radio station up. You know, you said it's going to be online at the end of February or the beginning of February.
No, end of February.
Okay, so basically we almost March. We got to wait till March, and then it'll be available. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Once we have done the training, then of course we have to do some test runs and trial runs, which we will keep quite close so that we can monitor it and whether it's working and the guys and the ladies are doing the job correctly. And once that is off, then we will go public and live. But I will keep the guys informed, and we will chat before that time again. So I will give an update on the radio station throughout the period.
Yeah, in fact, our next get-together here for Fireside with the Colonels will be on the 7th of February, if we're fortnightly 2 weeks out. So that'll be our next one. Does that sound right? 7th February?
It looks like if I'm available, yes. My what did you call it?
Planner? Calendar planner.
My diagram, with the dates. It's here in front of my calendar. So I just looked up and saw now I'm open on the 7th. So I'll put it in now.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah. So, for those who don't know, this is a program that we agreed to do together. We're doing it fortnightly, so every other week, so that we don't saturate people. It gives us a chance to talk about politics, developments, culture, language, even history, and then a little bit of, sprinkling of some war stories from both of us having served in uniform around the world and some of our experiences. Also, you get the advantage of both of us have lived in different parts of Africa, and so we can just relate, things. I find it very interesting when Wyatt talks about, Congo Brazzaville, which is a place that I never went to, but almost went to once. That was my unit actually deployed there just a few days before I arrived, and so by the time I got there, the mission was ending, was coming back. It was funny because in the way of war stories, we this is how uninformed I think our intelligence folks can be sometimes. I wasn't in the unit, but I was scheduled to head to a unit based in Italy, and they sent my counterintelligence agents, down to Congo Brazzaville to prepare for a possible non-combat evacuation operation from Kinshasa. So they went there to, be in countries, and if they have to use ferries to get people across, whatever, but you fly out of Brazzaville. So they went down there, and my first question was, do you guys know what's going on in Congo Brazzaville? I mean, they're on the verge of a coup themselves. It's not exactly stable governance at this time. This is over 20 years ago, and sure enough, within 3 weeks of my troops leaving Brazzaville, there was a coup attempt that took place in Congo Brazzaville. So it's just crazy.
Yeah, it was. In 1995.
Yeah.
1995, 1996, somewhere around there. And interesting, there was a lot of South African farmers who have moved up there. Mm-hmm. And how they sent in a Dakota plane at night to pick up the families. But there wasn't enough space on the plane. So 3 guys stayed behind. And the rest flew off just in time as the jeeps with the guns was driving onto the airport. And they got out, and the other guys walked from Dulisi all the way to the DRC. And there they was picked up, and they actually stayed at the embassy until somebody could pay their aircraft tickets or their flight tickets, and then they left back to South Africa. Very interesting stories that has happened there. I got a French friend who is actually working in the French intelligence services, who is living in a very nice house, way above what he is supposed to receive as a constructor, a builder there, because they only do small jobs, but he's living in this huge house. So one day I told him, listen, I know you are working for the French intelligence. And he said to me, his father was actually the guy in French intelligence. And he said that at that stage, his father phoned him the evening, and his father told him, listen, the Angolan troops are inside Pointe-Noire. And he said, no, it's impossible. And the next morning when they woke up, the whole town was blocked and controlled by Angolan troops.
Oh, jeez.
And from there, they moved up to Dulisi and up to Brazzaville. And when the dust settles, Sassou Nguesso was back in power.
Yep.
And people tend to think of Angola as a country with a weak defense force.
Oh, no, I don't. I think they're one of Africa's best.
And it has changed, because where we stopped in 1994 with everything, the developments, everything, they continue.
Yep.
And they are the most influential force in Central Africa.
Yep. Well, in fact, when the Congo, when Kabila needed help in the Congo, the Namibians, the Zimbabweans, and the Angolans all poured in to help out to stop him from being toppled, and then they just went about rapaciously robbing the minerals and such. But no, the Angolans, for a long time, I've told people, they're one of the few countries in Africa that actually has lift capacity to fly their own troops from one place to another. They can actually do that. Now, it's not on a strategic level, but they can do it at a tactical and operational level, which almost no other country in Africa can do. I mean, South Africa can't do that anymore. Its C-130 fleet is old, and its Dakota fleet is ancient, so they don't really have they didn't buy the A400M, which they were supposed to, with Airbus, supposed to be part of the consortium. They backed out of that. So South Africa doesn't have lift capacity. Algeria has lift capacity, and the Egyptians have it, but they don't know how to use it properly. So in sub-Saharan Africa, the only real country that can actually move, if it wants to, move its troops around is probably Angola. And they have. They've spent a lot of time and effort. Of course, their conflict resumed after yours. It ended briefly, and then Savimbi was unhappy with the results, so he went back to war. And that continued for another 7 years or so, and they poured a lot of resources in and built a military. Now, I don't know how they would fare on the battlefield, but on paper and anecdotally, having seen them doing different things, they seem to be one of the large. They're also a large military, much larger than the South Africa's military. They're huge, well over 100,000 troops in the Angolan forces. It is interesting. A lot of people just look at them and think back, when they got shellacked by the SADF and at Cuita Cunavale, and they're thinking, oh, okay, well that's the Angolans today. It's not. That's not the Angolans today. They don't need the Cubans today. They can do it on their own.
Yeah, I think they've developed a lot over the past couple of years, and they put a lot of money into the defense force, perhaps more into the defense force than any other department. But yeah, Angola is a growing and a developing country. It's going actually very well in Angola. I mean, tar roads you can drive now from the south of Angola out to the north. On beautiful highways, and everywhere you can refuel, and you got this little tuck shops at the fuel station. So it's very much similar than it is traveling in South Africa these days. There's one big difference: it's safe.
Yeah, well, that is a big difference. That's probably the most important difference. You can't overlook that one.
You can actually sleep at any place. But I must tell you this story, last story. Okay. Quickly.
Okay.
When we arrived in Brazzaville during the planning phase of the farmers going up to the Congo, we went to have a dinner at a place on the river. Mama something, and there's a sketch of a huge meerman, what did you call it, a mermaid.
Yeah.
With big breasts. Yeah.
Yep.
That one. And we were sitting all around the table, and there was a lady sitting at the other table next to us. And at a stage, she stood up and she came over to us. She said, well, I hear you are speaking Afrikaans. I'm from Pretoria. I said, well, don't sit there and come and sit with us. And I asked her, now, what the hell are you doing, woman alone here in Africa? She said, no, she's driving down from Morocco. She went to do one or other race in Morocco because that was her life dream. Her husband is a doctor in Pretoria, and after she had completed this race, he asked her, what are you going to do with the vehicle? Because he feels that his money is now a little bit low to load it back onto a ship, bring it back to South Africa. She said, no, she's going to drive it down. And she drove down from Morocco, woman alone, in a Land Cruiser. And all the way down, right to Brazzaville, where she met up with us, and she told me, not once was she threatened.
Yep.
Not once did she feel threatened. Everywhere the people are helping her. If she got stuck in mud or something, they just appear out of nowhere and they assist her getting out. And we were talking about that in the evening when we say our goodbyes. I said to her, just remember when you cross through Botswana onto the on the Zere side of the border, just remember, don't stop. Because then you are back in South Africa. Just don't stop next to the road. And it turns out that her husband was the, what did you call the child, the doctor?
The doctor. Sorry? Oh, the obstetrician? Or no, OBGYN? Pediatrician. Pediatrician.
Kids.
Pediatrician.
Kids.
He treats children.
Anyway.
He treats children, a pediatrician. Yeah.
And pediatry. Yeah, that's the right word. Sorry, sometimes my English is not that well.
So it's okay. Sometimes my English isn't that good either. It's okay.
And it turns out that her husband was the doctor who took care of my two youngest kids at birth. And it's a small world.
Yeah.
But for me, it was an incredible experience to find this woman in the middle of nowhere, walking alone in the streets of Brazzaville at night.
Yeah.
And nobody bothered her.
Well, you know, that's the thing. We say we've talked a lot about some of the challenges in Africa, but there are places in Africa where that's perfectly the norm. It's okay to do that. And of course, there's other places where that's not really a good idea. But, you know, in Monrovia, for instance, not really a good idea to be walking around late at night. You know, when I was in Liberia, of course, I ran frequently, and I ran in shorts, of course, because it's too warm. Whenever I was out and about wearing my fatigues, no one ever even once looked sideways at me or even made a threatening glance at me. They love Americans. They love soldiers. Of course, they'd always go, U.S. Marine, U.S. Marine, U.S. Marine. Of course, I'd have to remind them it's U.S. Army. Yeah, not a Marine. I'm not a Marine. I'm the Army. but they'd see that all the time. And actually, I became very well known in Monrovia because I was rebuilding the Army. I was on the radio and in newspapers all the time and giving speeches, seen all over town. And, you know, you stand out in a sea of black folks on the street, and you're the guy walking around fatigues and you're white. You kind of stand out. So people knew who I was. But the only time I ever came under threat is when I go for a run. If I ran, it was late afternoon or evening. I had people try to rob and assault me several times. You know, someone dropped a cinder block from a roof trying to knock me out, to rob me, or who knows what they're going to do. I mean, I didn't have anything on me, but yeah. And I had guys try to chase me down the road, try to catch me, but obviously I was faster than them. They couldn't catch me. But I wound up eventually changing my tack and, you know, just running in different places and making sure I didn't run it late in the afternoon or something like that. But, you know, I had such a hectic schedule, working 7 days a week, 12 to 16 hours a day, that you know, you got to stay fit. And if you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to drive to the base for the basic training way out in the bush, and you get back first at 8 or 9, and you've got to meet with the ambassador, then you've got a Ministry of Defense meeting. Next thing you know, you got people visiting from Europe or the UN. You've got to take them to dinner, and it's evening. So I've got to run. So I couldn't avoid it sometimes. But Monrovia, not so safe. But yeah, in Angola, I imagine that's probably a good case. I tell you, in Malawi, I had no problem walking around at night in Lilongwe or even Blantyre. No problems at all. And of course, I'm not a woman, so that's a different situation. But yeah, it is interesting. Africa definitely has its pluses, and it gets in your skin. You know, that soil gets under your fingertips, and it just, you know, it's hard to let go. It's just really the same to see what's happening in South Africa. There's a question here. Well, Arctic said, why would we buy the A400? This is a little bit ago. We could have upgraded the C-130s if we don't run them off runways. Well, that's true. Or you could just buy the C-130 Juliet, which is a much better aircraft, but they're very expensive. But the ANC's too busy stealing that money, so you can't afford those. Yeah, but anyway, so what's this here? Frederick Erasmus says, according to you, what country in Africa has the best defense force? Well, that's an interesting question. It depends the purposes. But I would tell you that for short duration missions and effectiveness, the Rwandan Defense Force is pretty reliable and getting things done. The Ugandan UPDF can be good, but it requires constant training and equipment from the United States in order for that to happen, because they neglect their force. If it wasn't for us, their troops wouldn't be. But their troops are trained, they try hard, and there's some good leadership in the Ugandan Defense Forces. Beyond that, the Angolans have an oppressive military. Zimbabwe is a disaster. The SANDF is a disaster. There are pockets of excellence in the SANDF, but as a force, it can't threaten anybody. I mean, look what happened in the Central African Republic when they came under fire a few years ago. That was a total disaster what happened there. And let's see, what else? Morocco has a very good defense force, very well equipped, and there's a lot of tension right now, Viant, between Morocco and Algeria over Western Sahara. And there's saber rattling going on there. And the other piece of that, it's not just Western Sahara, it's also because under Trump, Morocco once again recognizes Israel, and the diplomatic ties between those two countries are getting very close now. Morocco and Israel have been working very closely together. They've expanded trade ties, culture ties, flights, almost daily flights now. And the Algerians are getting very nervous about that. So between the Western Sahara and the Israeli relationship, there's a threat they're going to go to war. Well, the Algerians don't want to do that because their military couldn't even defeat their own insurgents over a decade in the 1990s, in which they killed 100,000 people. The Moroccan military is ready. I've worked with them. They're trained. They're professional. And the Algerians might find themselves on the back foot if they attack Morocco. Any thoughts on your part? Any militaries that might stand out to you as particularly good or effective?
No, it's interesting that you mentioned Rwanda.
Yeah.
Because Rwanda is part of this forces that is now deployed in Mozambique, up in Cabo Delgado.
Yep.
And it was just interesting, after the decision was made, they were the first on the ground.
Yep.
But there's another connection. But maybe I should not, yeah. The Rwandan president is a personal friend of Jacob Zuma.
Ah, okay.
And he's totally against Ramaphosa. Just think of a strategical move, moving his forces to the north of Mozambique. But okay,
well, but
let's not talk about that.
But
they got a good force that was able to move very quickly.
Yep. And
then because of Central Africa and what has happened there, especially in the neighboring countries of Angola, I would probably say that from Central Africa downwards, let's say Southern Africa, Angola probably got the best defense force at the moment.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so in North Africa, all the Egyptians are huge and they have a lot of resources. I would say the Moroccans are pretty impressive. And then in West Africa, the Nigerians have become so unreliable. I mean, the thing about Nigeria I've always said is that, and I've seen this play out in Liberia and Sierra Leone and elsewhere, with the Nigerians, if you're lucky enough to get the Nigerian battalion commander who is a professional officer, who's not focused on ethnicity, who is committed to professionalism, has gotten their training, say in the UK or in the US or somewhere like that. If you get someone like that, that leadership's going to come through, and that unit will be held to a standard, and they'll perform effectively.
Yeah.
But if you get the not typical, but the frequency, and I'd say it's about 50-50 with these Nigerian leaders. If you get the one who's just in it for himself, who cares more about being a Muslim or cares more about being a Christian, and then you'll have the Nigerians running prostitution rings, selling their weapons, selling drugs, raping, and we've seen this play out time and again. You'll see two battalions in the same force in Liberia, and there's peace and security where one battalion's at because of that single leader, and it plays out throughout the chain of command. And you see this other unit just terrorizing people and taking advantage. And the difference is that leader. If you took the other leader, put him over there, now it wouldn't happen instantly because you'd have to sack people, prosecute people. But if that other leader came over and fixed that other unit, it would stop doing that in a short matter of time. For me, that's the problem with the Nigerians is they're all over the place.
But we forgot Botswana.
Okay, no, yeah, okay. I didn't forget it. I left it out intentionally, but let's bring it up. Okay, so let me give you my thoughts on Botswana, and then I'll get yours afterwards. I've worked with them extensively. Botswana has a professional defense force, and they are focused on what they're supposed to do. Now, at times in the past, they haven't always been. For instance, their intelligence was focused on politics. Until I went to Botswana, the entire time since 1978, when the Defense Force was created, or 77, 78, in response to Joshua Nkoma's ZIPRA and the Rhodesians coming across into Botswana, from that time forward, the Army intelligence served the president, not the chief of defense force. So they were in uniform, and they carried guns, which they weren't authorized to do, but they carried guns. They shot people. They interrogated people. But they spied on Zimbabweans. They spied on South Africans. They spied on Botswana inside the country. And they were really an intelligence arm because there was no national intelligence agency. But just before I arrived in Botswana, Ian Khama created a national intelligence organization. And when I arrived, the chief of the intelligence there was very keen to get out of the business of doing national intelligence. He wanted to focus on the military. So I helped them. We developed a plan, and we transformed their intelligence operation into one that focused on tactical and operational intelligence and didn't focus on spying on people. But the Botswana Defense Force, that's one thing they've done very well. But they're very effective at counter-poaching. They're anti-poaching. They've done some very effective counter-terrorism operations. They've done peacekeeping in Somalia. They've been Operation Boleas in Lesotho twice with the SANDF. And when the SANDF soldiers dropped their rifles and ran away, the Botswana are like, what's wrong with these people? Anyway, no, they're very good. In fact, they were promised a lot by the ANC government to go to Lesotho to help out, to make it a SADC mission. Put that little blanket on it saying SADC. So Botswana went, and they were supposed to get fuel support, mechanics. They're supposed to get rations, water, and the SANDF provided none of that. They self-deployed all the way from Botswana on ground to Maseru and then throughout Lesotho. They're very impressive, but I didn't mention them intentionally right now because I don't know what's going on. I don't have insight because my links to the BDF are I don't know, I'd say tenuous at the moment because of Masisi, and there's people that don't like him that don't want to speak because they're afraid their heads will be cut off. And so most of the people that I know in the BDF that usually talk to me are being very quiet right now. So I haven't visited them in about 3 years. So but they're for the longest time I said they were Africa's best military, but their capability is very limited because there's only 11,000 of them. Anyway, your thoughts on the BDF?
No, I agree with you, Chris. It's just that people might think that we are leaving out Botswana for a reason. But then Botswana is a very, very neutral country in Southern Africa. They don't get involved into a lot of arguments with the rest of the countries. And there's, I think they are more amicable people to a point. But I don't see them as a threat to any situation in Southern Africa because they won't get involved into those situations. But I think they are well disciplined. I think they are well trained. They don't have a lot of equipment, but what they have is fairly well maintained. Yep. That's the idea I got. I don't have any inside information, and my deductions is purely from what I'm seeing on the ground. But if you know a soldier and you look at soldiers, you can see, are they good or are they not?
Yeah, exactly. No, and I can say unequivocally without any hesitation. Now, to be fair, I should mention that I also used to be an intelligence analyst that covered Botswana at the national level, and South Africa among other countries. But so I've written extensively about them in the past, and then also worked with them when I was in Botswana, and have worked with them at the African Union and other places. No, they're fantastic. In Botswana, you don't get promoted because you married the president's daughter. You don't get promoted because you're in the Botswana Democratic Party. You, by and large, get promoted because you've demonstrated competence and confidence of the people above you. And it's a meritocracy, generally speaking. There are exceptions. We got exceptions everywhere. But most of the leaders in the BDF are put in those positions not because they're white or black or brown. The Air Arm had white pilots. There were some white pilots, even though the country is almost, it's overwhelmingly black. But there were white pilots in there, and they were from Botswana. They are Botswana. And that's the thing. It's very close to South African in so many terms. I mean, much of the economy is South African. You got all the restaurants, all the businesses from South Africa come across the border there. The Tswana people are the same essentially as the Setswana people. It's the same language. They're all from the same major clan, major group. And then you've got a fair number of Boers and Afrikaans-speaking white folks who live in Botswana as well. So there are a lot of similarities, but it's an interesting place. And the military is very professional, very professional. But what's this? Somebody says Botswana haven't got a navy, and that's why I'm not a colonel. Says Nick Muller. That's funny, Nick. Yeah. Well, no, they don't have a navy. But you know what? The engineers have boats, and I've been on them. I've taken the Undersecretary for African Affairs up there. We went to Kasane. We flew up in a C-130, which Botswana has, and they're functional. But we flew in a C-130 up there. We went to Kasane, and we were briefed by a major who used to be a non-commissioned officer, and then he transitioned to be an officer after 15 years in the military, and wound up retiring as a major. He was in charge. He's the commander of the counter-poaching, anti-poaching unit that was located in the Kasane area, and the engineers belonged to him. So we took the undersecretary out onto the Chobe River there, and we went up and down the thing. It was interesting because I promised her that, you're coming to Africa, we're going to show you wildlife. I mean, that's not why she came, but I said, don't worry, in the midst of doing our official business, we're going to be up at Kasane and you're going to see wildlife. And we hadn't seen any wildlife. We went out on a patrol and, we sat in a place watching a patrol actually, rehearse and do their patrolling out there, their base in the bush. And then we hadn't seen any wildlife, nothing, not even a freaking black mamba snake, nothing. And then we go back out from this hour drive from Kasane where this anti-poaching camp was at. By the way, that unit had just shot 2 poachers a few days before that. They just shot them in an engagement. So this was real stuff. We went back up. We go to Kasane. We get in with the engineers. They put us in boats, and all of a sudden it rains. Oh my gosh! I thought it was in the Congo or Liberia. It was coming down in sheets, and we got completely soaked out there. And then the rain let up, and we're in the middle of the river. And you got Sududu Island over there, or Kisakili, as the Namibians like to say, on one side. And we come up the channel, and you look over the shore, and all these elephants and all these other zebra and everything is just coming right down to the water to drink. And so she finally got to see wildlife. So I was like, okay, I don't have to worry about getting sacked now. She got to see the wildlife.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, well, we should probably wrap up here in a few seconds. Listen, please send me the information about the radio station if it's available, so I can put it in our next stream and let people know about it. We can start advertising it so that once it comes up, people can watch it, or not watch it, listen to it, I should say. And that should be some good stuff. Well, listen, so many challenges in South Africa, so many challenges in Africa. Hey, so many challenges in America. I'm telling you, on this side of the Atlantic, it's crazy these days. But this is it's our Fireside with the Colonels, Wynand, Toit, Chris Wyatt, and we want to thank everybody for tuning in. Hey, be sure to smash the like button. I haven't asked once in the stream. I know my moderators and other people have been asking, but we're over 200 likes. Please smash that like button. If you're not a subscriber to this channel, please become one. We struggle mightily to overcome YouTube suppression, and it's not about ego. It's not about audience size. It's about honest reporting, honest analysis, honest assessment about what's happening in Africa and around the world. And so we do appreciate it. Ryan, with that, I'd like to, just leave it with you with anything that you might want to share with the audience. I don't know, about South Africa or something that's going on before we wrap up. Any last comments or anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
No, Chris, it was just great to have a chat to you tonight. And it's good for the people to listen and to hear and the sort of experience the wider picture behind stuff, because one can never see yourself in an isolated situation or a position anywhere in the world. There's all other countries eventually have an influence on your country, and we must remember that. And when stuff are happening in your country, you must try and digest it and think of what the possible outcomes of that situation can be. At the moment, of course, it don't look too good in South Africa, but who knows? Who knows what happens, over the next months or so. And then we see, and we must keep it up. And great chatting to you as always. And see you guys next time.
Well, I think that's a great commentary to wrap things up. This is a phrase, while it's Afrikaans, and it's specifically one that the Boer are very comfortable with. I think it applies for all South Africans. And, in the midst of everything going on, Boer maak 'n plan, I think that's everyone needs a plan. Everyone's got to be prepared. And as far as your comment about, countries influencing, I look back when fees must fall, and then this nonsense about, this is racist, that's racist, and the politicization, the polluting of language that's been going on by race hustlers in South Africa. And gosh, that's on our shores. We've got the exact same situation on this side of the Atlantic now. It's absolutely crazy. And I'm not saying it came from South Africa. Maybe we're just trying to keep up. I don't know what the deal is. But the point is that what happens in one country is not isolated. It can happen in all countries. And we're seeing it play out today. Well, thanks a lot. It's a real pleasure to have you on again. And if you can hang on for a second while I close out, and then we'll chat just very briefly afterwards, if that's okay. And then we'll.
That's great.
Okay, so Wynand and I will talk offline here. Just a moment. I'll put him in the waiting room. Let me put you in the waiting room, folks. Okay. Colonel Wynand Toit, and then we'll put him in the waiting room, and then I'll join up with him in just a second. Let me close out the stream. All right, folks. Thanks a lot. Be sure to smash the like button. If you're not a subscriber, please become a subscriber. By the way, change is coming to my background. I've finally secured cabinets and cases that I'm satisfied with. I just got to assemble them now, and you'll see a very different background coming very soon. So we'll see how that goes. I'll be back for Night Owls here in a bit. We're going to talk about news. I'm also going to update you on what happened yesterday at the Defeat the Mandates rally in Washington, D.C. Yes, so I'll be talking about that. Also, you can catch my videos for performances is by High Res and Jerry Levy, High Res and Jerry Levy. This is a revolution, and those things, you can find those on Odyssey and Rumble, where there's no censorship. And anyway, but thanks a lot, folks. We'll catch you here if you want to come back for Night Owls in 1 hour and 36 minutes for Night Owls on Chris Wyatt Africa. And for the folks who might have tuned in for the first time, I hope you enjoyed it. You found something useful. This is what we do. We have a conversation to talk about events. Thanks, everybody. It's nice seeing some new names out here in the chat, and I'm sure you all came over from Wynand's channel. So bye dankie, kia la boa. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. And once again, my thanks to my co-host, Wynand Toit. This is a fun conversation. I think he enjoys it. I know I do. And we'll see you in 90 minutes or so if you want to hang around. Cheers.